The funeral was designed to be unforgettable, because everything about Margaret Hale was unforgettable. On a cold Manhattan morning, black luxury sedans lined the street outside the historic cathedral. News helicopters hovered at a respectful distance. Inside, polished marble floors reflected rows of powerful faces: CEOs, senators, old money families, and people who owed their fortunes to the woman now lying in an elegant mahogany coffin at the front. Margaret Hale, the reclusive tech billionaire, was officially declared dead 2 days earlier. The press reported cardiac arrest in her private penthouse. No interviews were given. No questions were answered. In life, Margaret controlled information. In death, it seemed, she still did. As the organ music faded, the priest began to speak about legacy, discipline, and quiet power. Margaret's only son, Daniel Hale, sat rigid in the front row. His jaw was tight, his eyes hollow. He hadn't cried once. Not when the doctors spoke, not when the body was sealed, not even now. Something about the speed of it all felt wrong, but grief had buried his doubts. Outside, the city continued as always. Sirens wailed somewhere far away. A garbage truck turned the corner, brakes squealing as it slowed near the cathedral. The driver, Eli Turner, leaned forward in his seat, staring. "No way," he muttered. Earlier that morning, Eli had been working his usual route when he noticed something odd near a private alley behind Margaret Hale's building, a small medical alert bracelet lying beside a trash bin. He almost ignored it, until he read the engraving. Margaret Hale, rare neurological condition, extremely low pulse during episodes, risk of false death declaration. Eli's hands had shaken. Years ago, his wife suffered from a similar condition. Twice, paramedics failed to find her pulse. Twice, Eli had screamed until they checked again. She survived the first time. The second time, she didn't, but Eli never forgot how easily a life could be misread as over. Now, staring at the cathedral doors and the banner announcing Margaret Hale's funeral, the pieces slammed together in his mind. "This is wrong," he said aloud. Before his partner could stop him, Eli jumped out of the truck and ran. Security guards noticed him instantly as he burst through the cathedral doors, boots echoing against marble. Heads turned. Murmurs spread like wildfire. "She's not dead," Eli shouted, his voice raw but certain. "You have to stop this." The priest froze. Daniel Hale stood halfway from his seat. Guards rushed forward, grabbing Eli's arms. "Get him out," someone hissed. Eli struggled, reaching into his pocket. "Wait, please. Look at this." He held up the bracelet. "I found it this morning. She has a condition. Her pulse can drop so low it disappears. I've seen this before. You bury her, you kill her." The words cut through the air, shocking and dangerous. Cameras clicked. Whispers turned into alarm. Daniel stared at the bracelet, blood draining from his face. He recognized it. He had given it to his mother years ago, after she collapsed during a board meeting and laughed it off. "Stop," Daniel said suddenly. The guards hesitated. Daniel stepped closer to the coffin, heart pounding. For the first time since his mother's death, doubt broke through his controlled grief. And in that moment, the flawless funeral began to unravel. The cathedral fell into a tense, unnatural silence. Daniel Hale raised a trembling hand, signaling the guards to step back. Eli Turner stood frozen, breathing hard, still holding the bracelet like proof of truth itself. Cameras were lowered. Even the priest stepped aside, sensing that something far bigger than ceremony was unfolding. Daniel's mind raced. He remembered the bracelet clearly, how his mother had brushed it off, calling it an inconvenience. She hated appearing weak. After her collapse years ago, she had demanded privacy, threatening lawsuits against any doctor who spoke to the press. And now, everything had happened so fast. Too fast. "Call an emergency medical team," Daniel said sharply. "Now." "But sir," one advisor whispered, "the doctor's already." "Now," Daniel repeated, his voice cutting through the noise. Within minutes, paramedics rushed in, pushing past shocked mourners. The coffin was opened under their supervision. Several people turned away, unable to watch. Eli held his breath as the paramedic placed fingers gently against Margaret Hale's neck, then checked again, slower, more carefully this time. "There," the paramedic said quietly. "It's faint, but it's there." A gasp swept through the cathedral. Someone dropped to their knees. Daniel staggered back, gripping a pew as relief and horror crashed over him at once. His mother was alive. Barely, but alive. Margaret Hale was rushed to the hospital under heavy escort. Doctors worked carefully, monitoring her rare condition, stabilizing her body, correcting the terrible mistake that had nearly cost her life. Hours passed like years. Late that night, Daniel sat alone in a hospital hallway when a doctor finally approached him with a tired smile. "She's stable," he said. "You were minutes away from losing her forever." Daniel closed his eyes, overcome. The next morning, the news exploded across the nation. Billionaire declared dead, saved at her own funeral. Reporters camped outside the hospital. Analysts questioned the private medical team. Public outrage grew over how such an error could happen to someone with unlimited resources. 3 days later, Margaret Hale spoke publicly for the first time in her life. She appeared seated, pale but alert, her voice calm and controlled. "I did not fake my death," she said. "A rare medical condition and human error nearly ended my life. If not for one man doing his job and paying attention, I would not be here." She turned slightly toward Eli Turner, standing awkwardly at the edge of the room in a borrowed suit. "You saved my life," Margaret said. "I want to reward you." She offered him a check, an amount that could have changed his future overnight. The room waited. Eli shook his head. "I don't want the money," he said quietly. "I just don't want this to happen to anyone else." Margaret studied him, then nodded. Weeks later, the Hale Medical Awareness Initiative was announced, a nationwide program focused on rare conditions, emergency training, and second-check protocols. Eli Turner was hired as a consultant, his name forever tied to the moment one ordinary voice stopped an extraordinary mistake. A funeral meant to honor a death had instead exposed a truth. Sometimes, the people society ignores are the ones who save it. The world moved on quickly, but for Daniel Hale, nothing felt the same. Weeks after the funeral that never was, he sat beside his mother's hospital bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. Machines hummed softly, each sound a reminder of how close he had come to losing her. Power, money, influence, none of it had protected her when it mattered most. Margaret Hale recovered slowly. The woman known for absolute control was forced to surrender to time and care. During those quiet weeks, she reflected on a lifetime spent building systems that valued speed, efficiency, and profit. Ironically, those same values had nearly killed her. Her private doctors had trusted data over patience, routine over doubt. One afternoon, she asked Daniel to bring Eli Turner to her room. Eli arrived wearing his sanitation uniform, cap in his hands. He looked uncomfortable standing in a room that cost more per night than his yearly rent. Margaret studied him carefully, not as a billionaire evaluating risk, but as a human being measuring gratitude. "You didn't just save me," she said. "You broke something open." Eli frowned. "I just spoke up." "That's exactly it," Margaret replied. "Too many people stay silent because they think their voice doesn't matter." She asked him questions about his work, his late wife, and the long hours he spent unnoticed by the city he kept clean. For the first time in decades, Margaret listened without interrupting. When Margaret was finally discharged, she didn't return to her penthouse. Instead, she moved temporarily into a quieter residence and began restructuring her empire. Advisors were shocked as she delayed deals and canceled meetings. Her focus had shifted. The Hale Medical Awareness Initiative expanded rapidly. New protocols were introduced across hospitals. Mandatory double checks for rare conditions, longer observation windows, and improved communication with families. Medical schools requested her funding. Emergency responders received updated training. What began as one mistake evolved into a nationwide reform. Eli's life changed too, but not in the way people expected. He kept his job. He still woke up before dawn and rode the back of the garbage truck through familiar streets. But now, people noticed him. Some thanked him. Others simply nodded with respect. He used his new platform to speak at training sessions, sharing his experience and reminding professionals to look twice, to listen longer. Months later, Margaret held a small, private gathering, not a press event, not a celebration of wealth. She invited doctors, sanitation workers, nurses, and first responders. People who rarely shared the same room now sat together. Margaret stood, steady but humbled. "I built my life believing control was everything," she said. "But control blinded me. It took someone with no power, no title, to remind me that attention and compassion save lives. She turned to Eli. "You stopped my funeral," she said softly. "But more than that, you changed my legacy." Outside, the city roared on, unaware of how close it had come to burying a living woman. And somewhere in that noise lived a simple truth: heroes don't always wear suits or uniforms of authority. Sometimes, they wear gloves, drive trucks, and refuse to stay silent when something feels wrong.